She spent 20 years believing her father abandoned the family, until one stormy night, an old photograph led her back to an abandoned cabin hiding a secret so disturbing it would destroy everything she thought she knew about her past. Sarah had spent most of her life trying not to think about her father. In a small town like Ash Hollow, forgetting was impossible, but surviving meant learning how to bury certain memories deep enough so they stopped hurting every single day. People still whispered about the Morgan family whenever she walked past the grocery store or stopped for gas. Some said her father ran away. Others believed he died somewhere in the mountains. A few even claimed the old cabin near Blackwood Forest was haunted by his ghost. Sarah ignored them all. After 20 years, she had convinced herself that the truth no longer mattered. Until the photograph arrived. It came on a cold Thursday evening after work. Sarah was exhausted when she opened her apartment mailbox and found a plain brown envelope with no return address. At first, she almost threw it away with the junk mail, but something about it felt strange, heavy, important. She carried it upstairs, dropped her keys on the kitchen counter, and carefully opened it under the yellow glow of the dining light. Inside was a single photograph. The moment she looked at it, her entire body froze. It showed the old family cabin deep in the woods, the same cabin abandoned since the night her father disappeared. The porch looked older now, covered in moss and broken wood, but there was no mistaking the place. Sarah's heart pounded as her eyes moved across the picture. And then she saw him. Standing near the dusty fireplace inside the cabin window was a man wearing a dark coat and gray beard. The image was blurry, but the shape of his face, the way he stood, even the scar near his eyebrow, it was him. Her father. Sarah dropped the photo onto the table as if it had burned her fingers. She stepped backward, breathing hard, unable to process what she was seeing. Her father had vanished 20 years ago without a trace. Search teams looked for months. Police questioned everyone. No body was ever found. Eventually, the town accepted the simplest explanation. He abandoned his family and disappeared willingly. But this photo changed everything. The date printed on the back made her stomach twist. 3 days ago. Someone had recently been inside that cabin. And somehow her father was there. Sarah barely slept that night. Every memory she spent years trying to suppress came flooding back into her mind. She remembered the sound of her father chopping wood outside during winter storms, the smell of coffee in the mornings, the way he used to lift her onto his shoulders near the lake behind the cabin. She also remembered the night he vanished, the police cars, her mother crying silently at the kitchen table, neighbors standing outside whispering in the rain. As the hours passed, one question kept haunting her. Who sent the photograph? The next morning, Sarah drove 2 hours to visit her younger brother Ethan. He opened the door half asleep, but the moment he saw her face, his expression changed. What happened? Without speaking, Sarah handed him the photograph. Ethan stared at it for several seconds before shaking his head immediately. No, that's impossible. I thought so too. This has to be fake. Sarah crossed her arms tightly. Look at the date. Ethan flipped the picture over, and the color drained from his face. For the first time in years, neither of them knew what to say. The silence between them felt heavy. Their father's disappearance had damaged both of them in different ways. Ethan became angry at the world, while Sarah learned to shut people out emotionally. Neither of them ever truly healed. But now the past had returned and knocked directly on their door. You're not thinking about going there, are you? Ethan asked quietly. Sarah looked out the window toward the cloudy sky. I need answers. That place is abandoned. Exactly. Ethan ran a hand through his hair nervously. Sarah, people don't disappear for 20 years and suddenly come back. She looked at the photograph again, her hands trembling slightly. Then somebody wants us to believe he did. The deeper Sarah walked into the cabin, the more it felt like stepping inside a memory that had been left to rot. Every floorboard creaked beneath her boots, echoing through the empty rooms like whispers trapped in the walls. Dust floated through the weak flashlight beams while rain hammered against the broken windows outside. Ethan stayed close behind her, his nervous breathing the only sound besides the storm. Nothing inside looked completely destroyed. That was the first thing Sarah noticed. For a place abandoned nearly 20 years, the cabin felt strangely untouched. The old couch still faced the fireplace. A stack of books remained on the shelf near the piano. Even the kitchen table still held a cracked ceramic mug, sitting exactly where someone had left it long ago. It was as if time had stopped the night their father disappeared. Sarah slowly ran her fingers across the piano keys. A dull, broken note echoed through the room, instantly sending chills down her spine. She remembered her mother sitting there during winter nights, softly playing old songs while their father cooked dinner nearby. Back then, the cabin felt warm and alive. Now it felt like something was watching them. Ethan suddenly pointed his flashlight toward the hallway. "You hear that?" Sarah froze. At first there was nothing. Then, a faint tapping sound. Tick, 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 coming from somewhere deeper inside the cabin. Ethan swallowed hard, probably just rain leaking through the roof. But neither of them believed it. The sound continued as they slowly moved toward the back room. Sarah pushed open the half-rotted door and immediately stopped. The room had been their father's study. She hadn't entered it since she was 12 years old. The desk still stood beside the window, covered in dust and old papers. Bookshelves lined the walls, but what caught Sarah's attention was the floor near the desk chair. Fresh mud. Not old dirt. Fresh footprints. Someone had been here recently. Ethan crouched beside them carefully. "These aren't ours." Sarah's heartbeat quickened. The footprints led toward the fireplace downstairs, then disappeared. A sudden gust of wind slammed a window shut somewhere in the cabin, making both of them jump violently. "This place is seriously messed up," Ethan muttered. Sarah ignored him and searched through the desk drawers. Most contained old receipts, maps, and faded notebooks, but the bottom drawer refused to open. "It's stuck." Ethan stepped forward and forced it open with both hands. Inside sat a small cassette tape recorder. And beside it, a single tape labeled in black marker. "For Sarah only." The words instantly made her stomach tighten. Ethan stared at her. "You think Dad left this?" Sarah carefully picked up the tape. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned it over. Dust coated the edges, but it didn't look ancient. In fact, it looked almost clean compared to everything else in the room. Someone had touched it recently. Thunder exploded outside as Sarah carried the recorder into the living room. She wiped dust from the machine and inserted the tape slowly. For a second, nothing happened. Then static filled the cabin. Crackle. Hiss. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside her. Suddenly, a voice emerged through the noise. "Sarah, if you're hearing this, I'm probably gone." Sarah nearly dropped the recorder. It was her father's voice. Older, tired, but unmistakably his. Ethan looked pale. The tape continued. "I need you to know something. I did not abandon you." Static interrupted the message again. The sound warped violently before the tape stopped completely with a loud click. "That's it," Ethan whispered. Sarah immediately rewound it and pressed play again. Same message. Same cutoff. But this time she noticed something strange hidden beneath the static. A sound repeating faintly in the background. Knock. 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 Then a long metallic creak. Again. Knock. 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 Sarah replayed the section several times, listening carefully. Her eyes slowly moved downward toward the wooden floor beneath the rug near the fireplace. "Help me move this." Ethan frowned. "Why?" "Just help me." Together they dragged the heavy rug aside, revealing dark wooden boards underneath. Sarah knelt down and brushed away years of dust until her fingers touched cold metal. An iron ring, built directly into the floor. Ethan stepped backward immediately. "No way." Sarah pulled hard on the ring. At first nothing happened. Then the wooden hatch slowly lifted open with a painful groan. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness below. A hidden basement. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. "I grew up here," Ethan whispered. "How did we never know about this?" Sarah pointed her flashlight downward. Narrow stairs disappeared deep underground beneath the cabin. And from somewhere below came the faint sound of dripping water. Ethan shook his head instantly. "Absolutely not. We came here for answers. And horror movies start exactly like this." Ignoring him, Sarah began climbing down carefully. The wooden stairs creaked under every step. The smell below was overwhelming: earth, rust, mold, and something older she couldn't identify. Her flashlight beam shook slightly as the basement slowly came into view. Then she froze. The walls were covered in newspaper clippings. Hundreds of them. Missing person reports. Crime investigations. Photographs. Maps. Strings connecting different locations. Ethan descended behind her and stopped cold. "What the hell is this?" Sarah moved closer to the nearest wall. One clipping showed a newspaper headline about smuggling operations near the old mining roads outside town. Another mentioned several disappearances connected to Ash Hollow decades earlier. Then she noticed the photographs. Pictures of their family. Pictures of the sheriff. Pictures of unfamiliar men standing near trucks deep in the forest. Everything was pinned together carefully like someone had been building a case for years. At the center of the room stood a large table covered with documents and handwritten notes. Their father's handwriting. Sarah recognized it immediately. "He was investigating something," she whispered. Ethan picked up one of the photos and stared at it carefully. "That's Sheriff Donnelly." Sarah looked over his shoulder. The sheriff stood beside 3 men near the abandoned mines outside town. The photo was grainy, but all 4 looked tense, as if arguing about something. "What does this even mean?" Sarah checked the date written on the back. Her blood ran cold. The photograph had been taken 1 week before their father disappeared. Suddenly, the entire room felt different. This wasn't some hidden storage basement. It was evidence. Their father hadn't simply vanished. Something happened here. Then Sarah noticed one final object sitting, alone near the back wall. An old corkboard covered with maps. Pinned directly at the center was a recent photograph of her. Not from years ago. Recent. Taken outside her school parking lot only weeks earlier. Ethan saw it too, and immediately stepped backward in shock. "No," he breathed. Beside it was another photo of Ethan outside the fire station. And another of their apartment building. Someone had been watching them. Recently. A loud thud suddenly echoed upstairs. Both of them froze instantly. Another thud. Heavy footsteps crossed the cabin floor above them. Slow. Deliberate. Creak. Sarah's flashlight flickered violently. Ethan grabbed her arm. "Someone's up there." The footsteps stopped directly above the basement hatch. Then complete silence filled the cabin. For several terrifying seconds, neither of them moved. Then came the sound of the hatch slowly opening upstairs. And a voice drifted down from the darkness above. "You were never supposed to find this place. Sarah's entire body locked with fear as the voice echoed down the basement stairs. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Ethan instinctively stepped in front of her, gripping the flashlight tightly like a weapon while the weak beam trembled in his shaking hand. The cabin above them creaked softly. Then silence. Heavy silence. The kind that makes your heartbeat sound louder than thunder. Sarah slowly looked toward the basement steps. A shadow moved near the top of the stairs, barely visible in the darkness. The figure stood completely still, watching them without speaking again. Ethan swallowed hard. Who's there? No answer. The shadow finally began descending slowly, one step at a time. Creak. Creak. Sarah's pulse pounded painfully in her ears. Every instinct told her to run, but her legs refused to move. The figure came closer until the flashlight finally revealed part of his face. Gray beard. Wrinkled skin. Deep, tired eyes. And a scar near his eyebrow. Sarah gasped softly. The flashlight nearly slipped from Ethan's hand. It was him. Older. Thinner. Broken by time. But unmistakably their father. For several endless seconds nobody moved. The air itself seemed frozen. Sarah stared at the man she had imagined 1,000 times over the years. Sometimes she dreamed he was dead. Other times she imagined he started a new life somewhere far away and forgot about them completely. But now he stood only a few feet away. Real. Alive. Tears instantly filled Sarah's eyes before she could stop them. Dad. The old man looked at her like he couldn't believe she was standing there either. Pain spread across his face the moment he heard her voice. You shouldn't have come back here, he whispered. Ethan's shock quickly turned into anger. No, he snapped, stepping forward. You don't get to say that. Their father lowered his eyes silently. You disappeared, Ethan continued, his voice shaking. 20 years, and now we find you hiding under a cabin. Sarah could see the guilt crushing the old man before he even spoke. I had no choice. That's a lie. Ethan's voice echoed violently through the basement. You left Mom alone. You left us thinking you were dead. Their father flinched at every word like he deserved them. Sarah finally found her voice again. Why? The question came out small and broken. Simple, but carrying 20 years of pain behind it. Their father looked at both of them carefully before speaking. The sheriff found out I was asking questions, he said quietly. Questions about the mines, about the men using them. Sarah frowned through her tears. What men? Smugglers, he answered. Traffickers, dangerous people moving things through Ash Hollow for years. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. You expect us to believe this? I uncovered records, names, routes, payments. He gestured weakly toward the walls covered in evidence. I thought if I exposed them, the police would stop them. Sarah suddenly remembered the photographs upstairs. The sheriff standing beside strange men near the mines. Her stomach tightened. The sheriff was involved. Their father nodded slowly. When he realized what I knew, he threatened this family. The room fell silent again. He told me accidents happen in small towns, he continued softly. Fires, car crashes, missing children. Sarah felt cold all over. I didn't know what to do. I tried going to state police, but somebody tipped them off before I could speak. His voice cracked slightly. Then they came after your mother. Ethan's anger weakened, replaced by confusion. So you ran? No, their father looked directly at him. I disappeared. The distinction hit differently. Not abandoning them. Hiding for them. I made a deal, he said quietly. I vanish forever and they leave my family alone. Sarah's eyes filled completely now. You could have contacted us. Their father slowly reached into his old coat pocket, and removed a thick bundle tied with string. Letters. Dozens of them. Every envelope carried Sarah's name, or Ethan's name in faded handwriting. I tried, he whispered painfully. Birthdays, Christmases, every year. Sarah carefully took one of the letters. The envelope was worn and yellow with age. Unopened. Her hands trembled as she looked up at him. They all came back. Ethan stared at the pile silently, his anger beginning to crack under the weight of what he was hearing. I watched from a distance whenever I could, their father admitted. I saw your graduations. I saw Ethan become a firefighter. Ethan looked stunned. I never stopped being your father, the old man said softly. Not even for one day. Sarah stared at the bundle of letters in her hands as if they might suddenly disappear. The basement felt colder now, heavier somehow, as though the truth itself had changed the air around them. Her father stood quietly near the table covered in evidence, looking like a man carrying decades of regret on his shoulders. Ethan finally broke the silence. If you sent these, he said slowly, why didn't Mom ever tell us? Their father's expression changed instantly. Pain. Real pain. He lowered himself into the old chair beside the wall, suddenly looking much older than before. For several seconds he said nothing, as if he had spent 20 years trying to avoid this exact moment. Then he whispered the words Sarah never expected to hear. Because your mother knew everything. The sentence hit harder than anything else that night. Sarah blinked in disbelief. What? She knew why I left. No, Ethan snapped immediately. No. She thought you abandoned us. Their father shook his head slowly. She helped me disappear. The room went completely silent, except for the distant sound of rain above them. Sarah felt dizzy. Images of her mother flooded her mind instantly. The exhausted woman working double shifts. The quiet crying late at night behind locked bedroom doors. The way she avoided talking about Dad whenever Sarah asked questions as a child. All those years. All those lies. She told us you left because you didn't love us anymore, Sarah whispered. Tears filled her father's eyes immediately. I begged her not to say that. Sarah stepped backward, trying to process everything at once. Her chest tightened painfully. Part of her wanted to scream. Another part wanted to collapse. She believed hatred would protect you better than fear, he explained quietly. If you spent your lives angry at me, maybe you'd stop searching for answers. Ethan shook his head over and over. No, Mom wouldn't do that. She was terrified, their father replied. The sheriff threatened all of us. She thought if people believed I ran away willingly, nobody would keep digging. Sarah remembered something suddenly. The night before her father disappeared. She had woken up thirsty and walked downstairs quietly. She remembered hearing her parents arguing in the kitchen. Her mother was crying while her father kept repeating the same sentence. It's the only way. At the time, she was too young to understand. Now the memory felt completely different. You both planned it, Sarah said weakly. Their father looked shattered. We planned survival. Sarah's anger finally surfaced. You let us hate you for 20 years. Her voice echoed across the basement walls. You know what that did to us. The old man lowered his head silently. I know. No, you don't, Sarah shouted, tears streaming down her face now. You missed everything, every birthday, every school play, every holiday. Mom died thinking we hated you. She didn't. Sarah froze. Their father slowly looked back up at her. Before she died, she wrote something for you. He reached carefully into an old metal box beneath the table and pulled out a sealed envelope. Sarah recognized the handwriting immediately. Her mother. Her hands trembled violently as she took it. For a moment, she couldn't even open it. Ethan moved beside her quietly while she unfolded the letter inside. The paper was old and fragile. Sarah read silently as tears rolled down her cheeks. Sarah, if you're reading this, it means the truth finally found you. I'm sorry for every lie I told you about your father. I did it because I was afraid. Afraid that if you searched for him, you'd become targets too. Your father loved you more than anything in this world. Everything we did to keep you alive. Sarah covered her mouth, unable to stop crying. The image she carried of her mother her entire life suddenly shattered and rebuilt itself at the same time. Her mother hadn't been protecting a lie. She had been protecting her children. Ethan wiped his eyes roughly and looked away, trying to hide the emotion breaking through his anger. She suffered because of this, he whispered. Their father nodded slowly, every single day. Sarah folded the letter carefully against her chest. For years, she blamed her father for destroying their family. But now she realized the truth was far more tragic. Both of her parents had sacrificed their lives in different ways. One disappeared into isolation. The other carried the burden of silence until the day she died. Morning arrived slowly over Ash Hollow. After the endless storm, the mountains looked strangely peaceful beneath the pale sunlight. Water dripped from the trees surrounding the cabin while fog rolled softly through the forest. For the first time in years, Sarah stood outside the old family cabin without fear in her chest. Everything felt different now. The truth had changed everything overnight. Ethan carried another dusty box from the basement and loaded it into the back of the Jeep. Inside were years of hidden evidence, documents, photographs, recordings, names, and maps their father had secretly collected while hiding from the men connected to the sheriff's operation. Their father stepped carefully onto the porch, holding an old coffee mug in both hands. In daylight, he looked even more fragile than before. His hair had turned almost completely gray, and deep lines marked his tired face. Yet despite the exhaustion in his eyes, there was something else there too. Relief. 20 years of hiding were finally coming to an end. Sarah leaned quietly against the porch railing beside him. Neither spoke for a while. Birds chirped somewhere deep in the woods, replacing the thunder that had haunted the night before. Finally, her father broke the silence. "I used to sit here every morning," he said softly, "before you kids woke up." Sarah glanced toward him. "You always hated waking up early." A small smile appeared on his face for the first time. "And you always sneaked outside anyway, because you wanted pancakes before Ethan ate them all." Sarah laughed unexpectedly through her tears. The sound caught her off guard. It had been years since laughter and pain existed together inside her at the same time. For a brief moment, she wasn't 32 years old anymore. She was 12 again, standing beside her father on the same porch before life tore their family apart. Ethan walked back toward them, closing the Jeep door hard. "We should leave soon," he said quietly, "if those people are still around." "They are," their father interrupted gently, "but they're weaker now." Ethan folded his arms. "You still think the police will believe any of this?" "They'll have to." Sarah looked toward the boxes filled with evidence. What if they buried this before? They almost did. Their father stared toward the forest. But too many years have passed. Too many people involved are dead, retired, or gone. The ones left won't protect each other anymore. For the first time, Sarah realized how exhausting his life must have been. 20 years constantly hiding, watching his children grow from a distance, living with fear every day. Alone. "Where did you even go all this time?" she asked softly. He took a slow breath before answering. "Different places, Montana, Idaho, small towns mostly," he smiled weakly. "I learned how invisible lonely people can become." Sarah felt her chest tighten again. "Why come back now?" Her father looked toward the cabin. "Because someone found me." Ethan stiffened instantly. "Who?" One of the men from back then. His voice darkened slightly. A few months ago, he contacted me, said people were starting to ask questions about the old mines again. Sarah frowned. So he threatened you? No, their father's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. He warned me. That surprised both of them. He was dying, the old man continued. Cancer. He told me the sheriff kept records hidden somewhere and wanted me to destroy mine before someone else uncovered everything. Sarah looked confused. Why would he help you? Because guilt destroys people eventually. Silence settled over them again. After a while, Ethan finally asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him all night. Why send the photograph? Their father smiled faintly. I didn't. Sarah's stomach dropped. What? I never mailed you anything. Cold fear immediately crept back into the air. Sarah and Ethan exchanged nervous looks. If you didn't send it, Ethan whispered, then someone else wanted you here. The peaceful morning suddenly didn't feel peaceful anymore. Sarah looked around the forest uneasily. Every shadow between the trees now felt dangerous again. Do you think someone followed us? Their father's expression turned serious. Possibly. Before anyone could speak again, the sound of an engine echoed through the woods. All three turned instantly. A black SUV slowly emerged through the trees and stopped near the cabin. Ethan cursed under his breath. Two men stepped out. One older, one younger. Neither looked friendly. Sarah's father went pale immediately. That's him. The older man removed his sunglasses calmly as he approached the porch. His movements were slow, confident, almost casual. But his eyes carried something cold inside them. Well, he said quietly, family reunion. Ethan moved protectively in front of Sarah. The man looked toward their father. You should have burned everything when you had the chance. Their father stepped forward despite his fear. It's over. The man laughed softly. You really think a few papers matter now? Sarah noticed the younger man near the SUV, reaching into his jacket. Everything suddenly happened at once. Ethan shouted. Their father lunged forward. A gun appeared. Then, a deafening gunshot exploded through the mountains. Birds burst from the trees overhead. Sarah screamed. For one horrifying second, she thought her father had been shot. But instead, the younger man collapsed near the SUV, clutching his leg in pain. Several police vehicles stormed through the forest road behind them. Officers surrounded the cabin instantly. The older man cursed furiously as police forced him to the ground. Sarah stood frozen in shock. Then she saw who stepped out from the lead police car. Detective Lena Brooks, a state investigator. She approached Sarah carefully. You sent the evidence anonymously last night, Sarah asked breathlessly. The detective nodded. We've been reopening cold cases connected to Sheriff Donnelly for months. Your father contacted us recently. She glanced toward the arrested men. We were waiting for them to make a move. Their father looked stunned. You tracked them. We tracked everyone. The detective turned toward Sarah gently. The photograph was meant to bring you here before they destroyed the remaining evidence. Sarah looked at her father in disbelief. You trusted them. He nodded slowly. For the first time in 20 years, yes. Hours later, officers carried boxes of evidence from the basement while investigators photographed the cabin. Reporters would soon flood Ash Hollow once the story broke open. Corruption, trafficking, disappearances, threats. It was all finally coming to light. But Sarah barely noticed any of it. She sat quietly on the porch beside her father, while sunlight filtered through the trees around them. Everything felt emotionally overwhelming. Anger, relief, grief, love, loss, all tangled together inside her heart. "I wasted so many years hiding you," she whispered. Her father looked down sadly. "You had every reason to." "No," Sarah shook her head slowly. "I had half the truth." He didn't answer immediately. Then he said softly, "Sometimes half the truth destroys people more than lies." Sarah looked at him carefully. For years she imagined confronting him if he ever returned. She imagined screaming, blaming, demanding answers. But now that moment had finally come. All she felt was sadness for everything their family had lost. Ethan eventually joined them quietly, sitting on the wooden steps. None of them spoke for several minutes. Then Ethan suddenly laughed weakly to himself. "What?" He wiped his face. "I spent 20 years planning what I'd say if I ever saw you again." He looked toward their father. "Turns out I had no idea." Their father smiled painfully. "Neither did I." The three of them sat together while workers moved around the property behind them. The cabin no longer felt haunted now. It felt human, filled with mistakes, fear, sacrifice, love. Sarah reached into her pocket and unfolded her mother's letter once more. She read the final lines quietly in her mind. "One day you'll understand that protecting the people you love sometimes comes with impossible choices. Don't let anger steal the years you still have left." Tears filled her eyes again. She looked at her father sitting beside her, the man she thought abandoned her forever. Older now, broken in many ways, but still her father. Slowly, Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. And for the first time since she was a little girl, she felt home again. The truth about Ash Hollow shocked the entire country over the following weeks. Investigations exposed decades of corruption tied to the sheriff's department and criminal operations hidden beneath the old mining network. Several arrests followed, and families connected to old disappearances finally received long-awaited answers. But for Sarah, the biggest change happened quietly. Not in courtrooms, not in newspapers, but inside herself. She stopped carrying the hatred that had shaped her entire adulthood. She learned that pain can twist love into silence. That fear can force good people into impossible decisions. And that sometimes forgiveness begins the moment we finally understand the full story. The old cabin was eventually repaired instead of destroyed. Not because anyone wanted to remember the darkness hidden there, but because it also became the place where a broken family finally found each other again. And every year after that, on the first morning after the season's biggest storm, Sarah, Ethan, and their father returned to the cabin together for breakfast. Pancakes, coffee, and stories they no longer had to hide from. Because sometimes the people we believe abandoned us were actually sacrificing everything to protect us. And sometimes healing only begins when the truth finally comes home. Disclaimer: this story is completely fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. All characters, events, and locations in this video are imaginary. Any resemblance to real people or real-life incidents is purely coincidental.